Frederick, Colorado, a quiet, sunlit town where kids rode bikes on cul-de-sacs and American flags fluttered outside freshly painted homes. It was the kind of place that made real estate brochures practically sell themselves. And nestled on a street lined with trimmed hedges and manicured lawns stood a two-story home with beige siding and a red front door. Inside lived the Watts family, Chris, Shanann, and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste. To neighbors and Facebook friends alike, they were the portrait of a modern, happy American family. But behind the family photos, daily Facebook updates, and warm smiles was a chilling truth that no one could have imagined. The social media facade. Shanann Watts was a social media enthusiast, a driven businesswoman working with a health and wellness company. She used platforms like Facebook to share not just her work, but her life. Her page was filled with videos showing her daughters giggling in the kitchen, romantic posts about her wonderful husband, and encouraging words about overcoming obstacles and living your best life. To her growing network of followers, Shanann was inspirational, resilient after a lupus diagnosis, loving toward her kids, and endlessly grateful for the support of her husband Chris. Chris Watts, in contrast, was soft-spoken and mild-mannered. A technician at Anadarko Petroleum, he rarely posted anything. But when he appeared in Shanann's videos, he seemed like the quiet backbone of a strong family. A dependable dad, a loving husband, a man without a trace of darkness. Together, they appeared to be living the American dream. Two beautiful daughters, a third child, a baby boy on the way, a new home, financially stable, friends who adored them, a life anyone would envy. But appearances can be deceiving, and in this case, deadly. Trouble behind closed doors. Beneath the perfect posts, there were cracks in the marriage. Debt had started piling up. Credit cards, medical bills, and an expensive mortgage weighed heavily on the couple. There were rumors among close friends that Chris had grown distant, quieter than usual. Shanann confided in some that he seemed withdrawn, uninterested, even cold. They'd been through counseling before, and she suspected they might need it again. But still, she fought to hold things together. She continued praising Chris publicly, posted ultrasound photos of their soon-to-be son, and documented every sweet moment with their daughters. To the outside world, they were just another busy couple managing the chaos of life with young children. To Shanann, there was still hope, but to Chris, there was something else. A man with a secret. Unbeknownst to Shanann, Chris was living a double life. He had started an affair with a coworker, a woman named Nicole Kessinger. What started as flirtation quickly evolved into a secret relationship. He told Nicole he was separated, on the verge of divorce, and even went as far as saying he didn't have children. Chris was infatuated with the idea of starting fresh. A new life, clean break, and to him that meant eliminating the past, eliminating Shanann and the children that tethered him to the life he now wanted to escape. No one suspected a thing. Not his co-workers, not his neighbors, not even Shanann. The family's final days. In early August 2018, Shanann and her daughters visited family in North Carolina while Chris remained in Colorado. During that time, things escalated. Shanann noticed Chris had grown more distant than ever, uninterested in talking to her or the girls on the phone. She even shared her concerns with close friends, admitting she felt like something was deeply wrong. When Shanann returned to Colorado on August 13th after a business trip, she walked into what should have been a loving homecoming. But something felt off. Chris was emotionally detached. The warmth was gone, and though she had no way of knowing it, so was her safety. That night, the house on Saratoga Trail remained quiet. Two children were tucked into bed. A pregnant mother returned home tired, but hopeful. And the man she loved, whom she called her Rock, was about to commit one of the most horrifying crimes in modern American history. The calm before the nightmare. In neighborhoods like this, no one expects evil to creep in. That's why when Shanann and Bella and Celeste were reported missing the next day, the community went into shock. Police arrived. Friends gathered. Search teams formed. Chris gave interviews, pretending to worry, pleading for their return. But his calm demeanor raised suspicions almost immediately. How could a father be so collected while his entire family had vanished? The story would unravel quickly. What started as a missing persons case would become one of the most shocking and heartbreaking family murders in recent memory. And the smiling, quiet man neighbors once trusted would soon be seen for who he really was, a monster hiding in plain sight. It started as a normal Monday morning, August 13th, 2018. But by 9 a.m., something felt off. Shanann Watts had missed a scheduled doctor's appointment. She wasn't answering texts. Calls went straight to voicemail. And her close friend Nicole Atkinson, who had dropped her off just hours earlier after a business trip, was growing more worried by the minute. By early afternoon, that worry had turned into full-blown panic. A friend's instinct. Nicole knew Shanann's routine inside and out. They worked together at Thrive, a wellness company, and spoke multiple times daily. Shanann was meticulous, especially about appointments, never missing a beat when it came to her pregnancy checkups. So, when she didn't respond for hours, Nicole did something few would. She acted immediately. She drove to Shanann's house in Frederick and knocked. No answer. The car was in the garage. Lights were off. The baby monitor showed nothing unusual. But Nicole knew something was wrong. She called the police. That single act of intuition would be the first crack in Chris Watts' fragile story. The police arrive. Frederick Police Officer Scott Coonrod arrived at the Watts home just after 1:40 p.m. Chris wasn't home, he claimed to be working, but agreed to meet the officer there. Nicole gave the officer a brief rundown. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant. Her purse was still inside the house. So were her keys and phone. She would never leave without them. And her daughters, Bella and Celeste, only 4 and 3, were nowhere to be seen. Chris finally arrived. Calm, collected, too calm, according to many who watched the body cam footage later. He gave Officer Coonrod permission to search the house. What they found sent chills down everyone's spine. Inside the home, Shanann's purse was sitting on a counter in plain view. Her shoes were by the door. The girls' blankets and toys were untouched. Her car, parked in the garage, still had the girls' car seats inside. To an officer trained to spot warning signs, it was a glaring red flag. Nothing in the house suggested that Shanann had left voluntarily. There were no signs of a struggle, but there were also no signs of a normal day. Chris offered weak theories. Maybe Shanann took the girls to a friend's house. Maybe she was upset and needed space. But he couldn't explain why she hadn't taken her essentials, or why she'd vanish without telling anyone. Nicole and the officers didn't buy it. And soon, neither would the nation. Media frenzy begins. Within hours, the case caught fire. News stations rushed to Frederick to cover the story of a missing pregnant woman and her 2 daughters. The Watts house, with its picture-perfect exterior, became the epicenter of national concern. Chris, playing the grieving husband, agreed to a local television interview. Standing on his front porch, he pleaded for their return. "If you're out there, just come back. If somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody again." But something about his demeanor felt wrong. His tone was flat. He didn't shed a tear. And his arms were crossed defensively the entire time. Online sleuths, reporters, and even casual viewers began asking the same question. Why doesn't he seem more distraught? The investigation intensifies. As the media buzzed, police ramped up their efforts. Shanann's phone was examined. Her last text message was a photo of her ultrasound, sent to Chris. She had returned home from Arizona around 2 a.m., but after that, nothing. No digital footprint, no social media updates, no calls, no texts, silence. The FBI was brought in. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI, joined, and so did cadaver dogs. Inside the house, dogs picked up faint scents. Investigators noticed inconsistencies in Chris's story. He said he left for work at 5:15 a.m., but GPS data from his truck painted a more complicated picture. Then came the game changer, a neighbor's security camera. The neighbor's suspicion. One of the Watts neighbors, Nate Trinastick, had a surveillance camera pointed toward the street. When he invited police to review the footage, they caught something strange. The video showed Chris backing his truck into the driveway, something he never did before. He was seen loading what appeared to be large, heavy items into the back. Early in the morning, right before he said he went to work. As police watched, the neighbor stood to the side, arms crossed, visibly uncomfortable. After Chris left the room, he turned to Officer Coonrod. "He's not acting right," Nate whispered. "He's normally quiet, but I've never seen him like this. Something's off." The footage didn't prove a crime, but it planted doubt in the minds of investigators. They needed more, and soon they would get it. A lie detector and a crack in the story. 2 days later, on August 15th, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test. The agents made it clear this was his chance to be honest. He failed. FBI agent Tammy Lee told him point blank, "There's no way you're telling the truth." Chris squirmed, still trying to maintain the illusion. But then investigators used a strategy known as minimization, suggesting maybe Shanann had done something and Chris had merely reacted. That's when Chris broke. He didn't confess fully, but he made a startling claim. Shanann had killed the children, and in a fit of rage, he killed her in response. It was a lie, but it was the beginning of the truth. The arrest. By the end of the day, Chris Watts was arrested and charged with the murder of his pregnant wife and 2 daughters. He was held without bond. The man who had just appeared on TV begging for his family's return was now the prime suspect in their deaths. Still, the public didn't know the full horror of what happened. That would come later when Chris finally confessed. And when the bodies were found, the facade had shattered. But the darkness beneath it was even more terrifying than anyone imagined. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. The media frenzy had only just begun. What once looked like the idyllic suburban dream was unraveling fast. While Chris Watts appeared to be a grieving husband and father, the cracks in his calm facade were becoming harder to ignore. And behind closed doors, detectives were beginning to suspect that this tragedy wasn't what it seemed. The police start digging. In the days following Shanann's disappearance, investigators delved into the couple's digital footprints. Text messages, emails, social media posts. All became pieces in a dark and rapidly evolving puzzle. Shanann's phone, discovered still in the home, revealed a different version of her marriage than Chris was offering. Text after text showed a woman growing increasingly anxious about her husband's distant behavior. She had confided in friends that Chris was acting cold and unloving. The final messages before her death were heartbreaking. "He's not the man I married. I don't know who he is anymore." Meanwhile, Chris's story started shifting. At first, he told police he had no idea where his family went. But inconsistencies in his timeline raised red flags. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's home captured Chris backing his truck into the garage early in the morning. The same morning, he claimed not to know where his family was. The footage didn't show anyone else leaving the house. The mistress. Then came the bombshell. Investigators discovered that Chris was having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. According to her, he had told her that he was in the final stages of a divorce and that his wife was no longer in the picture. Nicole was shocked to discover Shanann and was not only alive during their relationship, but pregnant. She immediately cooperated with investigators, providing texts, emails, and a timeline that cast serious doubt on Chris's version of events. The public was stunned. The wholesome family man image shattered. Chris Watts, the devoted father and husband, had been leading a double life. The motive was becoming clearer, and it painted a chilling picture of someone willing to eliminate his entire family to live freely. Chris breaks. Under mounting pressure, Chris was brought back in for questioning. Trained FBI interrogators used psychological tactics, subtle at first, then direct. They confronted him with the affair. They showed him the video from his neighbor's surveillance. And eventually, they offered him a polygraph test. He failed it spectacularly. When the interrogators told Chris the results were clear, his mask began to slip. He asked to speak with his father. In a private room, Chris broke down. Crying, he confessed, first partially, then fully. Chris claimed he killed Shanann and in a fit of rage after she allegedly strangled the 2 girls. But this version didn't hold. Forensic evidence and autopsy reports would later prove that wasn't true. Shanann was strangled, and the girls, Bella and Celeste, were smothered. The story had changed, but the truth was beginning to emerge. The aftermath of the confession. Detectives now had enough to charge Chris Watts. The arrest shocked the nation. A man who just days earlier had appeared on TV pleading for his family's return was now in custody for their murders. In the small town of Frederick, Colorado, neighbors were horrified. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Chris had blended in, waved hello, played with his kids in the yard. If a man like him could commit such unspeakable acts, then who could be trusted? Social media erupted. News stations camped outside the Watts home, and people across the country were glued to every new detail. This wasn't just another domestic homicide. It was a psychological thriller playing out in real life. A man with everything chose to destroy it all, and the question echoed everywhere. Why? The truth was finally out, but for many, it was hard to accept. Chris Watts, a seemingly loving husband and father, had murdered his pregnant wife, Shanann, and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste. The motive? To start a new life. But in trying to run from responsibility, Chris left behind a wake of horror, betrayal, and national grief that still lingers. No trial, just a confession. In an unexpected twist, Chris Watts chose not to go to trial. Instead, he entered a guilty plea to all 9 counts against him, including 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of murdering a child under 12, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a dead body. He made the decision after consulting with Shanann's family, who didn't want the case to be dragged out any longer in court. They didn't want to relive the brutal details. In exchange for his guilty plea, the death penalty was taken off the table. On November 19, 2018, Chris was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 3 to be served consecutively. The courtroom was filled with grief. Shanann's family gave emotional impact statements that left no dry eye in the room. Chris sat emotionless until his mother spoke. Then he wept. But the public wasn't ready to let go just yet. The shocking prison confession. Just when the story seemed to be over, a chilling twist emerged. In February 2019, while serving time at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, Chris gave a detailed prison confession to investigators from the FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The new information painted a far more terrifying version of events than anyone had imagined. Chris admitted he had been planning the murders for weeks. He waited until Shanann returned home from a business trip at 2 a.m. He strangled her in their bed while she slept, then dragged her body downstairs, all while Bella, 4, and Celeste, 3, were awake and walking around the house. He then loaded their bodies into his truck, his daughters still alive and clinging to stuffed animals. He drove them nearly 45 minutes to an oil site where he worked. There, he smothered Celeste, then Bella, who reportedly said, "Daddy, no," as her last words. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave and dumped the girls' bodies in separate oil tanks. It was calculated. It was cold. It was evil. The internet reacts. The internet exploded. Social media communities, armchair detectives, and true crime enthusiasts dissected every detail. How did no one see this coming? Why didn't Chris just leave if he was unhappy? And how could a man murder his own daughters so brutally? Documentaries were released. Netflix's American Murder, The Family Next Door, sparked new conversations about domestic violence, the pressures of maintaining a perfect online life, and the dangers of narcissism and emotional detachment. Chris's affair with Nicole Kessinger became another focal point. Some believed she knew more than she let on. Others blamed her for driving a wedge into the family. But legally, she was never charged and cooperated fully with authorities. A legacy of grief and awareness. Today, Chris Watts is serving life in solitary confinement. He's not allowed contact with other inmates due to the nature of his crimes. His name will forever be associated with one of the most disturbing family annihilation cases in modern history. Shanann's family, the Razuseks, continue to honor her memory by spreading awareness about emotional abuse, coercive control, and intimate partner violence. They want the world to remember Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn baby Nico not for how they died, but for how they lived, full of love, energy, and hope. In the neighborhood of Frederick, Colorado, the house where it all happened still stands. But it's more than just a home now. It's a haunting reminder that evil can live next door. That behind even the brightest smiles, the darkest secrets can hide. When the cameras shut off and the headlines faded, the horror of what Chris Watts did didn't disappear. If anything, it became more haunting, etched into public consciousness through documentaries, interviews, and online forums that refuse to forget. But this final chapter isn't just about what Chris did. It's about what we all need to understand moving forward. Behind the facade, Chris Watts lived a double life. He was the guy neighbors waved to, the husband who smiled for Facebook photos, the father who played with his daughters. But all of it was a mask. Beneath it was a man willing to destroy his entire family for personal freedom and to chase a fantasy. The lesson? Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it smiles, mows the lawn, and hugs its kids in public. The Chris Watts case reminded us that evil can live behind white picket fences and Instagram-perfect photos. The cost of control. The Watts case wasn't just about murder, it was about control. Chris didn't just want to be with another woman. He wanted to erase his past, erase his obligations, and start fresh, on his own terms. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn baby Nico were viewed not as family but as obstacles. Psychologists called it family annihilation, a rare but devastating phenomenon where a person, typically male, murders their entire family to escape financial pressure, shame, or a failing relationship. In Chris's case, he chose annihilation over accountability. The power of social media. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Watts story was how it played out online. Shanann documented her life with enthusiasm, posting family videos, live streams, and updates. She believed in sharing her truth. But those videos, once meant to inspire others, were dissected, debated, and even used to question her character after her death. Shanann was blamed by some internet trolls for being too controlling, too bossy, or too much. It was a painful echo of how society often judges women harshly, especially those who speak up, lead, or demand emotional maturity from their partners. And while others fought to protect her legacy, the case became a lightning rod for how social media can both honor and distort the truth. The lingering ghosts. To this day, people still drive past the Watts family home in Frederick, Colorado. Some film videos, some leave flowers, others just stop and stare. The house is a tourist attraction for the morbidly curious, a symbol of suburban horror. The home has remained unsold for years. No one wants to live where such evil occurred. It's now become a cautionary monument, a place that once promised family, love, and safety. Now forever tied to betrayal and death. Chris remains behind bars in Wisconsin, serving multiple life sentences without parole in solitary confinement. He is reportedly isolated for his own protection, shunned even by other inmates. He claims to have found religion in prison. He writes letters to those who support him, but most people see it for what it is, another performance. Justice, memory, and the need to speak out. Perhaps the greatest legacy of this tragedy is awareness. Shanann's family, despite their grief, chose to speak out about emotional abuse, coercive control, and the dangers of ignoring red flags in a relationship. They've worked to change how domestic violence is viewed, not just as physical harm, but as a pattern of control, manipulation, and silencing. They urge anyone in a toxic or unsafe relationship to reach out, to tell someone, to not wait. Because while the Watts case ended in murder, the warning signs were there long before. Final words. Chris Watts didn't just murder his family. He shattered the illusion of safety that so many neighborhoods hold dear. He reminded us that darkness doesn't always come from strangers, but sometimes from the people we trust the most. And in doing so, he changed a quiet Colorado neighborhood forever. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell.